Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm going to be talking about technology and its impacts on overlanding. I've seen this a ton of times in a bunch of different Facebook groups and things like that where people are like, oh, GPS is the worst, this sucks, all this technology is bringing us down, right? We're not real overlanders anymore, you couldn't find your way to the mall without your GPS, that kind of thing. So today I'm going to kind of touch on that. I'm going to talk about what I think are some of the pros of technology, what some of the maybe cons are of it, and I'm going to dive into how overlanding is being impacted by all this new technology, right? So something that I read made me start thinking about this, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought it might be interesting for you guys. So if you want to hear more about technology and its impact on overlanding, some of the pros and cons, stay tuned. All right, guys, so as I mentioned in the intro, today I'm talking about technology and its impact on overlanding. So we all know overlanding has always kind of been about the spirit of exploration and self-reliance. Historically, it's kind of been viewed as like you got to be a tough guy or tough girl or whatever, right? To get into overlanding, you've got to be willing to sort of sacrifice and go out there and just sort of bite the bullet if, you don't have the right things to cook with, or if you're not really prepared. You kind of have to just be a tough person that's self-reliant and gets out there and bushcrafts your way out of any situation, right? But a lot of us have come to adopt technology too and sort of see the benefits and the pros and cons of technology. I would say for myself personally, the technology side of it is one of my favorite parts of overlanding. And what I mean by that is a couple things. So, 4 or 5 years ago, I had never even heard of overlanding. And you know how I heard about it and how I learned about it is that I watched YouTube videos. I read about it on online forums. I read about it on Facebook groups. I joined a couple of local overlanding groups. And again, 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have had that, right? You would have literally had to have lived near someone who had like an overlanding equipped truck and been like, that's interesting. What is that? That looks like something I'd like to get into. You'd have to go over and knock on their door and ask them questions to learn more about it. Whereas nowadays, with all the technology that we have, even before you get into overlanding, just kind of starting to learn about it, just sort of becoming, interested in it and wanting to know more about it, there are so many resources out there for you to check out. Some of those are Facebook groups, as I mentioned. There are a ton of local ones. Look for something that's local to you. Type in your area and the word overlanding and then see if there's Indiana overlanding for me, or Indy overlanding, or Midwest overlanding, that kind of thing as a group for yourself. YouTube, of course, is a huge resource. It's where I live. It's where I make most of my content. It's where I've absorbed and consumed most of the content that has taught me about overlanding and helped me build out my rig and helped me do all this different stuff that I've been able to do over the last 4 or 5 years, and all the things that I've learned about overlanding and connections I've made, right? So even though we can't maybe all of us go 24/7, go and live on the road and live out of our vehicles, we can live vicariously through these technological marvels of social media, YouTube, texting, whatever the case may be. Another thing is, I'm passable at GPS and following maps and things like that. My dad, we would go to Florida and he'd have the big world atlas up front and he'd be drawing lines on it and, poking his finger into things, and my mom would be helping direct him and that sort of thing. And there's a ton of value in that. So I'm not making fun of it, and I'm not saying, no one nowadays needs to have any sort of compatibility with maps or ability to read maps. It's a very valuable thing, and I'm still trying to continue to get better at that thing and learn about how to read traditional paper maps. And traditional paper maps will be there when your technology fails, right? So technology is not always 100% reliable. If you get out in the middle of nowhere and you lose your signal or you lose connection to the GPS, all of a sudden you're on your own. If you don't know how to navigate without those technological aids, you could be in trouble, right? But having the GPS, being able to, for me, I really like it for exploring, being able to go out in the woods and I find a really cool spot, I can just drop a pin, add a little note and say, hey, here's this spot. It's got a pond by it. It's got room for 4 or 5 rigs. This would be a great spot to bring some folks back to if I ever want to, have a group of people come out with me and hang out. The exploration piece of it and the sort of mapping your national forest or, wherever you happen to be exploring is really, really cool. And that makes it way easier than, trying to write down. I drove 5 minutes past the old crooked bent oak tree and there was a cow on the left. And then, you know what I mean? Like, it has changed everything, where now the exploration gets easier, revisiting spots that you've been to gets easier, finding spots gets easier, sharing spots gets easier. So the technology has, in my opinion, made it way better for us overlanders to be able to get out there and to explore and to find things and then to sort of share those with our friends and revisit those sites when we want to. Not to mention that that's a safety thing, right? Like, again, in the olden days, if you had gotten lost out somewhere, you might go forever and run out of gas, and then you have to hike out of the woods. And, it was a lot more dangerous back then. Whereas now with the GPS and things like that, you at least kind of know where you are all the time, and you can navigate your way out to safety if you needed to. Or if someone got hurt at camp and you needed to get out of there, you can kind of rely on your GPS to help get you out of there the quickest way possible and help get you to help. Same with things like a Garmin InReach or a Zoleo, those things that allow you to use the satellites to communicate with emergency response. Without that technology, again, there are situations. I mean, I had a meeting recently talking about this big Canada trip that I'm going on in about a month now. And we were talking about it. And at the farthest north that we are going to be, we're about 400 miles from the nearest civilization. And one of the guys that's coming with us is an EMT. And he made the point that he said, we were talking about there's a service that's like a lifeline service. You pay for it up front, and it's just almost like insurance. If something happened, you would still have to call them or email them right from your satellite communicator because we won't have signal. We'll be out in the middle of nowhere. But they will have someone there to you as quick as possible. Because his point is, even though I'm an EMT, even though I'm pretty trained in this stuff, if you hack, into one of your main arteries or whatever and you're bleeding out, like he can stop it, but he can't fix it. Right? Like, he's not going to be able to dive in and do surgery on my arm, and me bouncing around in the back of someone else's truck for 8 hours is not necessarily a feasible situation, right? So again, having that technology, having that GPS SOS to be able to send out a message if you really need help is super valuable for people that do like to push the limits a little bit, right? People that do like to get out and explore far away from where, other civilization is. Another piece of technology that is really, really cool and I think has totally changed the way that I do my stuff is solar power, right? Solar power, portable power banks, LiFePO4 batteries, things like that, the Red Arc system that I run in my truck. These things are amazing pieces of technology, right? So when I go on this Canada trip, we're gone for 2 weeks. We're out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to be reliant on my solar panel, recharging my big 200 amp hour LiFePO4 battery that I've got set up through a dual battery setup in my truck. That will power all of my auxiliary stuff. It'll recharge all my batteries, my drone. It will keep my tent powered. It will keep everything going that I need for this 2-week trip. It allows me to basically disconnect and get out and explore further and longer than I would have been able to before solar was so inexpensive and readily available. Same with these power banks. They get cheaper every day, right? The LiFePO4 batteries get cheaper every day. That 200 amp hour battery that I've got now is only about $600, which is a lot of money. But for that kind of capacity, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't even need to charge it. I could probably run all my stuff for 2 weeks off that battery and not even get down to 20-30%. So the technology, as it improves, as it increases, it allows us to do more cool things and go further out than we've been able to do before. Same goes for like GMRS radios, right? So we were, just even 10 or 15 years ago, I was using a CB radio. There was a lot of work that had to be done to tune the thing. You had transmission issues and reception issues, and it was difficult to get in touch with people, and you really couldn't get out of line of sight or you would lose the signal, right? You wouldn't be able to talk to people. And just even in the last few years, these GMRS radios have come a long way where now you can have a handheld that'll get you 2 miles of range. So again, it just makes your trip more enjoyable. It's easier to use. You don't have to tune anything. You put it on a channel. You put your buddies on the same channel. You can talk to each other. You can communicate. You can spot for each other. It makes getting up tricky trails easier. There's so many things about technology that just make everything better. The same goes for these new vehicles, right? Like, I know a lot of you have seen the new Tacoma coming out in 2024. There's a new Chevy Colorado coming out. Vehicles have come a long way too. Now, you can make an argument that simpler vehicles may be better in the long run, off-roading and doing overlanding type stuff. But then you can also argue that newer vehicles with a warranty that are, newer and have less miles and less wear and tear on them are more reliable, may be a better option. Plus, a lot of them have a lot better technology. my new 2023 Frontier that I've got has cameras, around view cameras, so I can actually see around the truck when I'm in it, because sight lines are tough coming out of a vehicle. But I can actually turn it to where I can see down the passenger side of my truck, so I can line up my tires with obstacles and things like that to get over them, which I didn't have any of that on my old truck, right? You had to get out, you either had to have a spotter out there telling you where to go, what to do, where to place your tires, or you'd have to put it in park, get out, go look at your line, try and figure out your line, and then get back in the truck and then try and hit it, blind basically, or hanging out the driver's side window. So now there's so much technology built into these vehicles too that makes your trips a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable. Vehicles are getting more quiet, so if you don't want, all the noises and stuff associated with off-roading, then you can have a more comfortable trip. And again, I don't want to make this sound too glampy either, right? Like, I definitely am not a glamper. I'm climbing up into a rooftop tent after a few beers every night, just like everybody else. But, having these technologies, having the sort of comforts and the ability to charge all your stuff up, keep in touch with people, that sort of thing, while you're out exploring and getting away, is just a nice option to have. Whether you utilize it or not is totally up to you, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear what you think. If you are on the podcast, go jump over to Facebook, jump over to Instagram, jump over to the Newbie Overlanders group, and join the conversation. Come over there and tell me what you think of this episode. Do you think technology is a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you hate it? Is it annoying? Does it take away from overlanding, right? Now, if you're watching on YouTube, there's a comment section right down below. Jump down there in the comments and let me know what you think about it as well. Do you think that it's taken away from it, or do you think it's a pro? Personally, I think it's a pro. But again, I hope that was interesting for you. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, post up in the comments down below on YouTube. Or like I said, go hop on the other things if you're listening on the podcast. I'd love to have you over there as well. As always, there are links to all my social channels down in the description below, so check those out. There are also links to the Patreon group where we've got a Discord and we chat 24/7, and we do a once-a-month call. So that's a ton of fun. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the Newbie Overlanders group, huge group growing every day on Facebook, full of awesome noobs, and then also some more experienced people that are helping people out. But you can ask real questions there, and there's not, the spam and the bullying and that sort of thing like you may see in some of the bigger groups. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, we'd love to have you there as well. But again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.